nuclear war will happen. A Russian propagandist with close ties to Vladimir Putin was warned nuclear war is unavoidable. Just how worried should you be about nuclear war? Biden says very. President Joe Biden issued a dire warning about the threat of nuclear war. According to him, we have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, this is a sign of just how serious the moment the world is in amid Russia's war with Ukraine. Not to mention, US-China tensions have escalated over the past several years, beginning with tariffs under the Trump administration and spilling over into broader tech restrictions under the Biden administration. There was that controversy in early February over an alleged Chinese spy balloon flying in US airspace, and it revealed just how fragile US-China relations have become. In fact, the incident pushed two countries to suspend already limited high-level talks. Just how bad is an all-out nuclear war going to be? We're going to look into that later in this video. Maybe sooner in life than we would like to admit. In fact, huge warships are already coming into play. Check this out.
Man our ship and bring her to life.
The USS Gabrielle Giffords, seen here in Texas in 2017, is what the U.S. Navy calls an Independence-class littoral combat ship, which means it can operate closer to shorelines than other warships. And on Monday, China's military claimed the Gabrielle Giffords illegally entered waters adjacent to a disputed South China Sea atoll that has recently seen several maritime confrontations. A Chinese spokesperson said, quote, "The U.S. seriously undermined regional peace and stability," adding that the U.S. disrupted the South China Sea and violated China's sovereignty. China is in disputes with several of its neighbors over its extensive claims of territorial waters in the South China Sea. The U.S. Navy said the USS Gabrielle Giffords was conducting routine operations in international waters in the South China Sea, consistent with international law.
Now, when it comes to the threat of nuclear war, I don't know whether we should be looking at China or Russia as the #1 threat for the United States. Just recently, a debate on TV, Russia 1 host Vladimir Solovyov said that a nuclear strike would not lead to widespread death and destruction if used against a non-nuclear nation. Now, could this mean a foreboding hint on the ongoing invasion of Ukraine? It's definitely becoming a slow attritional war, and it's already claimed over 300,000 Russian casualties. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has been talking about using nuclear weapons, and NATO didn't like that at all. But nothing has happened yet because other countries in NATO, much like the United States, also have their own nuclear arsenal as a deterrent. But now, with things getting even more serious in Ukraine, there's talk about the possibility of Russia actually going through their nuclear attacks, and that's causing some concern. According to one translation, Solovyov told panelists nuclear war was unavoidable and that it will happen, no doubt about it. Now, I honestly don't know about the finer details of this. Definitely something that they're probably keeping hush-hush in Washington. But I do think that it's about time that we finally educate a new generation about nuclear war. We knew all about it. Growing up, we knew a nuclear war could start and end civilization in a day, and that we're all going to die. Today's generation needs to be taught the same message and to hold our president leaders accountable for their actions that presently move us even closer to war. What do you guys think? Watching this video is already a good start. If you want to help get the truth out to even more people, you can boost this video by giving it a thumbs up. The like button's right there. And while you guys are at it, do not forget to hit the subscribe button and tap that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on our future videos. The Russian propagandist went on to talk about how we already had a nuclear war when 200 nuclear bombs were dropped on the territory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, and that not every nuclear war leads to destruction. Now, just to compare, the bombs that were dropped by the US on Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II had a yield equivalent to 15 and 20 kilotons of TNT respectively. By comparison, the largest nuclear warhead in America's arsenal is 1.2 megatons, 60 times more powerful than the one dropped on Nagasaki, while Russia is known to have bombs with an 800 kiloton yield. The blast at Chernobyl is estimated to be the equivalent of 20 kilotons of TNT. As it occurred at ground level and the reactor continues to pour out high doses of radiation, a 1,000 square mile area of modern day Ukraine is still largely uninhabited. What's scarier is that this isn't the first time that Solovyov or other Russian propagandists have threatened nuclear war. Just a week before this, the Russian pundit said that Russia would deploy nuclear weapons right away in the event of a conflict with NATO. In October, the head of Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, said nuclear weapons were the work of ineffable divine providence, while earlier in the year, Russian political commentator Yevgeny Satanovsky warned nuclear war will definitely happen with the US over Ukraine. I find it both horrifying and moving at the same time to consider that we're only alive today because of the few good, sane people who continuously choose in an intense situation not to act, not to launch. Here's how bad a nuclear war would actually be. Now, let me warn you guys, this is going to be very informative and the research is well done, but you may end up hating every single second of it. We all know that an all-out war with nuclear weapons between the US and Russia would be really, really bad. But just how bad would it be? And what are your choices of staying safe from these explosions, radiation, and nuclear winter that will probably follow? This is a question that's moved to the top of everyone's list now that there's been a lot of talk about nuclear weapons. And things have been chaotic to say the least, at least in Russia. So let's be real here. It doesn't really matter who starts the fight, who launches the first nuclear warhead, or any of that. Once one side shoots nuclear missiles, the other side fires back really quickly. Ballistic missiles from the United States submarines near Norway hit Russia in about 10 minutes. And Russian missiles from north of Canada hit the US in about a few minutes later. The first attacks mess up electronics and power grids with an electromagnetic pulse of tens of thousands of volts per meter. The next ones go for command and control centers and nuclear launch facilities. Land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles take about 30 minutes to reach their targets. Big cities get hit because they have military facilities, and it makes it harder for the other side to recover after the fight. Every hit makes a fireball as hot as the core of the sun, followed by a radioactive mushroom cloud. These intense explosions vaporize people nearby and causes fire and blindness further away. The fireball expansion then causes a blast that would damage buildings, crushing nearby ones. The UK and France also have nuclear weapons, and because of NATO, they have to help defend the US. So, Russia targets them too. Huge fires called firestorms spread in cities, with storm-level winds fanning the flames and igniting anything that can burn, melting glass and some metals and turning asphalt into flammable hot liquid. Sadly, the experts weigh in, and it turns out that the explosions, the electromagnetic pulse, and radioactivity from nuclear bombs are not even the worst part. The problem is something called a nuclear winter, caused by the black smoke from the huge fires caused by the bombs. The atomic bomb in Hiroshima caused a fire like this, but today's hydrogen bombs are way more powerful. A large city like Moscow with almost 50 times more people than Hiroshima can create much more smoke, and a firestorm that sends plumes of black smoke into the stratosphere, far above any rain clouds that would otherwise wash out the smoke. The black smoke stays up there for a long time, like a hot air balloon, because it gets heated by the sun. Fast-moving air currents in the sky spread the smoke across a large part of the world in just a few days. This makes the world super cold even in the summer. For example, places like Kansas, the temperature could drop by about 20 degrees Celsius. That's roughly 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and other areas could get even colder. Scientists think that over 5 billion people could run out of food, and about 99% of those in US, Europe, Russia, and China might starve to death. This is because most of the smoke stays in the northern hemisphere where it was produced, and the colder temperatures hurt farming, especially in places far from the equator. It's important to understand that there's a lot we don't know for sure about the impact of a nuclear winter. Things could be better or worse than expected, and that's why we should be careful when talking about it. A new research program with a budget of $4 million has started to help us learn more and have a clearer idea. But much more work is needed, since much of the research on this topic is classified and focused on military rather than humanitarian impacts. We can't predict exactly how many people would even survive a nuclear war, but if it's anywhere close to as bad as the study suggests, there won't be any winners, only losers. It might feel like we can't do much, but the good news is that you can actually help by sharing this video. That's a huge help. Since nuclear wars might start slowly, maybe by mistake, the more people who know about it, the better chance we have of avoiding one. And better now than later. President Biden has already warned about the threat of a nuclear war. As Biden explained, we've got a guy, Russian President Vladimir Putin, that he knows fairly well. He's not joking when he talks about the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. Putin has said several times he will use all the weapon systems available to Russia if its territorial integrity was violated, and he said he wasn't bluffing. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists warned even before Russia's invasion that the globe sits at doom's doorstep. the setting of its doomsday clock 6 at 100 seconds to midnight, the most ominous position of the dial since its creation in 1947. It's pretty crazy that 3 decades after the end of the Cold War, we still have to entertain these kinds of thoughts, you know? Worries about a nuclear war have been around since Moscow invaded Ukraine more than a year ago. But what makes it more concerning now is how real the threat feels, more than at any other time since the Cold War ended. Between Putin's menacing comments, Russia's illegal annexation of Ukraine territory, even as the Ukraine advances, and even more U.S. support for Ukraine, the danger is concrete enough that Biden is unnerved. On top of that, tensions between the U.S. and China have been getting even worse in just the past few years. It started with trade issues during the Trump administration and is now causing more problems with technology restrictions under Biden. Washington, D.C.-based think tank for strategic and international studies published a report that described U.S.-China relations as seemingly caught in a worseningly vicious cycle. They go on to say that this is even worse than the typical security dilemma in which each side takes steps to defend itself, which in turn generate insecurity for the other, who then responds in kind. Now, that definitely sounds like the recipe for disaster. There is something that we can do to help prevent nuclear war. A big part of it is just staying in the loop with what's happening daily, globally, and being a voice for diplomacy and peaceful talks between countries. It's something we're already doing here on this channel. We can support international treaties like the one about not spreading nuclear weapons, have open discussions with our friends and family to spread the word about how serious a nuclear conflict could be. And don't underestimate the power of reaching out to your local officials. Even though we may not run the world, our combined efforts can really make a dent in creating a safer and more stable world. Let's do our part to promote a culture of peace and keep those nuclear threats at bay. Let me know your thoughts on today's documentary in the comments. More to come on the next one. See you guys there.